a bit, and then 1:15 we'll start singing again and go into the last speaking session. Thank you. I suffered much for thee. I suffered much for thee, more than thy tongue can tell. Of bitterest agony, to rescue you from hell. I've borne it all for thee. What hast thou borne for me? I've borne it all for thee. What hast thou borne for me? Okay, that's fine. I'm sure you were chatting there. But why I chose this song is because of the next session. So the next session is about you, as Dr. Mugala put it in his presentation, one of his presentations, thinking about what is the end game? What are you in this for? And how can you better society? How can you make society a better place? One of those is to buy your business, be giving money to missions or to the work of God, or however you want to put that. And we'll have an idea from Chick-fil-A, the founder of Chick-fil-A, and his philosophy and what they do. Our brother Saidi will come and take us through that very, very shortly. But the idea is that you should be missionary-minded, or at least you should be thinking about the growth of the kingdom of God and your part being played by your business, supporting something of that. And this song is something about that the Lord has done much for us. What are we doing for him? And part of what we're doing for him is in our personal giving and our business giving as well. The microphone has gone? Okay. All right. Then secondly, there was a request for people wanted to register their names so that we can kind of be in touch. So there will be a schedule passing around. Just register your name, register your number, and if you have a business, you can also write it there. That's not what the schedule has, but you can see on the schedule where to put that if you do have a business. But your name and your number is fine. The other thing is that there is a desire to set up a Christian business, what do you call it? Can you, directory, yes, a directory. The Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Mugala was one, Dr. Mugala and I, by the elders, were working on a Chamber of Commerce. We still must try and see if we can get that done together with Kasote. But there is an issue to do a directory. Now, at this stage, I mean, like yesterday, I had some brother and sister who came asking, do I know anyone in the police sector who can help them get fingerprints sorted out for a police clearance to travel abroad? And of course, what they were asking was, do I know a Christian? Because everywhere where they went, you have to pay a little bit of money. They're not going to do it in one day. They will take 3 months or whatever it is. But do I know a brother? Now, this directory is precisely for that, a Christian business directory. So you have a business, you are put in that directory so that anyone who's a Christian can know veterinary or legal or accounting or retail or whatever it might be. And there's quite a number of headings in that directory. So you put your business under that particular heading, and anybody can look up and see, but it's a Christian business directory. So like those brethren yesterday, instead of asking me, they would simply turn to the director and see who has got something to do with that kind of business that clears for police clearance, or somebody that's got a security firm, but that is a Christian, or an agricultural firm or whatever. Do you have the picture yet? Okay, but we'll have it at the presentation anyway a little later. You'll see what it looks like. It's a directory that you can go to, but it's also one that you can advertise your business in for Christians to actually see. In a very, very good method. We'll ask Bernard to speak about it, because I think he's one of the people propagating it. This is Mugala, Bernard, I think the Elder Sakuya as well. Okay, so when you come at the panel section, we can speak about that. Right, we will ask our brother Saidi to come and present for us this example of this company and what can we learn from their missionary-minded philosophy.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me at the back? Sorry? Okay, all right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's quite intimidating when, huge, and I don't mean in size, Mr. Mgala, Dr. Mgala, huge men, have gone before you and they've made their presentations. It's equally more intimidating knowing that this session was supposed to be taken by Pastor Mbewe, and instead you've got good old me taking it. So I would value a quick prayer from you people. By way of disclaimer, I've been asked to speak on a mission-minded perspective to entrepreneurship. And we're basically looking at a case study of Chick-fil-A. So let me just put my disclaimer out there that missions is a whole subject, topic on its own. It's quite vast. And entrepreneurship is equally a whole topic on its own, which is quite vast as well. So I'm not going to do a presentation on missions and entrepreneurship. My presentation is to give you an appreciation of what a mission-minded perspective looks like through, or rather an entrepreneurship looks like through the lens of mission-minded perspective. And we are using Chick-fil-A, the company. How many of us in here know the company Chick-fil-A? Okay, a few, okay? Not that many. How many of us in here know KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken? A lot of us. How many of us know McDonald's? How many of us know Hungry Lion? Okay, so that's almost 80% of the people in here. But what if I told you that Chick-fil-A at one time surpassed McDonald's in terms of revenue? In fact, right now, Chick-fil-A is sitting at about $17, $18 billion. So it is not a small company by any stretch of the imagination. Chick-fil-A is one of the leading fast food outlets. And that's what we are going to look at in just a few seconds. The picture that was up there was that picture. That is the picture of the founder and owner of Chick-fil-A. And behind him, that is the front of Chick-fil-A. It is said to be one of the most smartest, cleanest fast food outlets in the world. Not just in terms of the frontage, but if you go in their conveniences as well, they are very, very clean, very, very smart. And we shall explain or explore why it is so. So that is my topic for today, a mission-minded perspective to entrepreneurship, cementing the case of the Chick-fil-A Group. And basically the topic is implying that we've looked at Chick-fil-A before. Now we're just cementing, we're cementing the view or the notion that Chick-fil-A is not a Christian company, but it is run on biblical principles. Okay? In fact, the owner of Chick-fil-A used to, he never liked people referring to Chick-fil-A as a Christian company. He said there is no such thing as a Christian company. A company does not go through regeneration and so on and so forth. It is only human beings. So it is a company that is being run on biblical principles. This is my agenda for today. It looks short, but item number 4, which is really the meat of my presentation, it has quite a number of subtopics under that. But in the main, we are looking at these 4 items. I'll do an introduction, look at the missions, and look at entrepreneurship. And this will be very brief, and it's a quick run through, just to get us to be on the same page when we are talking about a mission-minded perspective to entrepreneurship. We'll have some idea of what that means. I do appreciate the fact that some may not have been here when we were looking at Chick-fil-A Group last time we had a business seminar. So that's my agenda for today. So by way of introduction, and I say this because it's important for us to understand why we're even having these business seminars. Is it that we don't have anything to do, so let's go pass time at church? No. The elders, feel very strongly that these seminars, and there will be a few more, these seminars must, one, inculcate a biblical worldview about our vocation. They must inculcate a biblical worldview about our vocation. And when I talk about vocation, I'm basically talking about, employment, profession, trade, skills, anything that you're doing in life to put food on the table. Whatever your calling is, that is your vocation. Now, does it matter, or why does it matter that we should have a biblical worldview as Christians about our vocation? Well, it matters because it clarifies why God created humankind. It also clarifies why God created work. Our brother and elder, did mention the fact that before the fall, work was very good. It was pleasant. It also clarifies that before the fall, work was good and pleasant, and that after the fall, though distorted, the cultural mandate that is given in Genesis 1 and 28, it still applies. The cultural mandate, multiply, go and multiply and be fruitful and so on and so forth. That cultural mandate, it still applies despite the fall. And it's important for us to have a biblical worldview about our vocation, because it does clarify that. But also, it is important for us to have a biblical worldview, because it tells us, how to be the salt and light in Christ. After the fall, there is redemption. We who are the redeemed of the Lord, how ought we to be the salt and the light in this dark world? Again, it matters because by reflecting Christ to the world, we are actually performing missions. We are performing missions, which leads me to my next slide, which is a mission-minded perspective. What do we mean when we say a mission-minded perspective? Well, a mission-minded perspective is essentially a mindset that permeates, if you're talking in terms of a church, the leadership, that is the elders, the membership, and it is undergirded in the church's policy document. It's written somewhere. It's not just something that we understand, but it is something that is enshrined. If we're talking in terms of an organization, like we'll be looking at Chick-fil-A, it is something that permeates the executive committee, that is the top leadership, the employees, and it is also enshrined in their company policy documents. It has to be enshrined there for the mission-minded perspectiveness to be fully appreciated. But a mission-minded perspective also focuses on God's mission to advance his kingdom here on earth. A mission-minded perspective is Christ-centered. It holds hope for the unreached people groups. That is to say that when you're mission-minded, you have no qualms about, going to India as a missionary. You have no qualms about going to Dubai, to any place where there are people and they have not been reached by the gospel. A mission-minded perspective posits the gospel to be the power of God. Okay? And because of that, you are unflinching in your pursuit of being mission-minded. Entrepreneurship. Now, this is a hard one, because if you have 100 social scientists in this room and ask them to define what entrepreneurship means, you have 100 different definitions, okay? But for purposes of our discussion, we are going to define entrepreneurship to be the process of developing, organizing, and running a new business to generate profit while taking on financial risk. Okay, so you are setting up an organization because of a new venture. Now, this setting up of an organization has already been well articulated. That is the enterprise development. You can find that in the definition of entrepreneurship, but also you can find entrepreneurial venture. Entrepreneurial venture is essentially a new idea or new approach to doing business. It's a new way of solving a problem. There is a problem that you have identified which is not being met by the market, and you decide to put up this organization to meet that need that is on the market. Entrepreneurial mindset. Now, entrepreneurial mindset, it's essentially a skills set in terms of competence. What are your competences? Well, these are my competences, these are my skills. So when you talk of someone having an entrepreneurial mindset, you are talking of skill sets, you are talking about passion and persistence. I was discussing with some brethren about a certain friend who's been at it. Okay, he came up with this idea of importing already finished product, petroleum product, instead of processing it. And he did his calculations. He's able to land it much, much cheaper. The fuel cost would really go down. But he's been at it for 20 years. 20 years. I mean, if that does not speak about persistence or passion, then I don't know what does. Entrepreneur mindset also must have a can-do mentality. Can-do mentality. In other words, you know, there will be failures along the way, but you don't give up because of those failures. People will laugh at you. He thinks he can make it. She thinks she can make it. For your own comfort, Colonel Saunders actually started KFC at 65, when he was 65 years old. So all of you who are not yet 65 and have been trying, you still have time. Right, so now I have to marry a mission-minded perspective to entrepreneurship, using the case of Chick-fil-A. The way I would put this, the way I would cement the two together is that a mission-minded perspective is the lenses through which an entrepreneur looks at the world. I'll say that again. A mission-minded perspective is the lens that an entrepreneur views the world. And we'll see exactly that in the case of Chick-fil-A. But before we talk about Chick-fil-A, let's talk about the man himself. We get a sense of who he was. Unfortunately, Chick-fil-A founder went to be with the Lord on the 8th of September 2014. But who was Chick-fil-A? Or rather, who was S. Truett Cathy? In fact, at one time, in one of the interviews I read, he said that Chick-fil-A is Samuel Truett Cathy, and Samuel Truett Cathy is Chick-fil-A. So if I call Truett Chick-fil-A, you know exactly whom I'm referring to. So Cathy was founder and owner of Chick-fil-A. He was born in 1921 in humble circumstances. Unfortunately for him, he was born at a time when, you know, the Great Depression befell America. So that made a bad situation only worse. But that was good training ground for Samuel Truett. The hardness, the difficulty that he underwent, he actually learned, you know, how to be resilient. And the model that he attributes his entrepreneurial mindedness is his mother. His mother rented out rooms in their house because of the difficulty that they were going through. The father was a traveling salesman. He sold insurance, so he was never at home, which made things difficult for little Samuel because he didn't have a father figure. But the mother used to rent out, you know, rooms in the house to transient guests, people who are passing through. She would clean up the rooms, and she would also prepare food for them. And Samuel was watching what the mother was doing. At the age of 8, Truett started selling Coca-Cola bottles. He would buy 6 bottles at 25 cents, and then he would sell each bottle at 5 cents. And he was making a killing until the people in the neighborhood realized that, hey, we can as well walk to the shop and buy. Why do we have to buy from you, at 10 cents when we can buy at 5 cents? So somewhat through it, and I hope as I'm describing the man, you see some entrepreneurial tendencies in young Samuel. So he figured, okay, they're onto my game, so I will not just sell Coca-Cola. He expanded his product mix. He started selling other soda drinks, and he started to put ice in there were no fridges at that time, so he used to buy ice. There was a truck that used to pass through with ice. He would buy ice and get the ice and put it in the drinks, and his drinks would sell. And he ran that business successfully up to the age of 12, when he began to distribute newspapers. He had a paper route, like you get a contract from Daily Mail, and you go around Chilenge dropping off newspapers. He started doing that at the age of 12. And incidentally, at the age of 12 is when he actually got saved. After high school, Truett served in the army with his brother Ben. And after the World War II, they had saved enough money, so they came back home, wanted to open up a business. He had always had it in his mind to open up a restaurant from the days he used to see his mother cooking. So he went to a company to get a loan, and he was told, okay, we can give you so much, but you need to come up with some money yourself. So he sold off his car for I think $4,000 or something like that, and he got a loan for about $6,000, and he started his first restaurant called the Dwarf Grill, which is still in existence to this day. He bought a piece of land and built this restaurant. It had 10 stools and 4 tables. Talk about days of small beginnings. In 1951, his brother died in a plane crash. In fact, 2 of his brothers died in a plane crash, and that really affected Truett because he was running Dwarf with his brother Ben, who died in the plane crash. But he picked up himself and he went on to buy another Dwarf restaurant, which he later named Dwarf House. In 1961, while operating Dwarf House, he started experimenting with chicken. He'd see people bringing chicken, sandwich, and his shop or restaurant was near a mortar plant. And these people who would come from the plant, they would open their lunch boxes and get out the chicken and whatever the wife had prepared. And he started having this idea that, hey, maybe I can put a chicken between 2 bread. And he did that. Didn't work out too well because it had a bone. And each time he would cook the chicken, it wouldn't come out okay. Long story short, Truett, after going through all these prototyping where you test a product, take it to the market, it doesn't work, come back, people give you feedback, you come back, you work on it. Eventually he came up with this product, the chicken sandwich. And he sold this chicken sandwich to restaurants. Unfortunately, that didn't go too well because the restaurants were very dirty. So he decided to open his own outlet, which he did in 1967. That's when the first Chick-fil-A outlet was opened. Like I said, Truett was born again at the age of 12. Okay, so that's briefly about the man. There's so much to be said about the man, but that just gives us, a glimpse into what made him tick. Okay, incidentally, when he was running Dwarf Grill, which later became Dwarf House, he was working, and he carried this philosophy into Chick-fil-A when he eventually established Chick-fil-A. He was working 24/6. In other words, he didn't close his restaurant. It was 24 hours. He worked 12 hours, and then Ben, his brother, worked 12 hours, and they would switch like that. And he worked for 6 days, and he closed on Sunday. That philosophy started with Dwarf Grill or Dwarf House, and it carried on into the days of Chick-fil-A. Right, so biblical principles and business practices is what he was able to combine to have a mission-minded perspective to his entrepreneurship. He never saw any conflict, none whatsoever. In fact, he said, "It is from Scripture that I have learned how to handle business. It is from Scripture that I've learned how to give excellent customer service. It is from Scripture that I have learned how to treat employees." Incidentally, in America, they always have these polls, and these surveys. And Chick-fil-A has always come up tops in terms of, customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction. In 1982, when redefining the purpose of Chick-fil-A, they had just built this new headquarters, and they moved into this new headquarters, and he called his ExCom, his executive committee, and said, "Look, we need to redefine why we exist. We need to redefine why we are in business. Why is it we do what we do?" And through that brainstorming session of theirs, they actually came up with a corporate purpose, something akin to a vision statement. And this is how it reads: "To glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us." And he pulled that from the parable of the talent, the talents. And then the second part: "To have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A." Remember the story in the Sermon on the Mount? If someone asks you to walk a mile, walk 2. In other words, do something that is beyond their expectation. And this is how he translated it. And this is why Chick-fil-A has perhaps one of the best customer service in the world. And one of the things that he taught his employees is, when you serve a customer and the customer says thank you, you say, "My pleasure." Always my pleasure. So you can see that the the vision statement, it's derived from the Scriptures itself. So how can a guy like this have any conflict between biblical principles and business practice? He thought, and true to his word, that biblical principles informed business practice. Chick-fil-A had so many principles, biblical principles, but 3 of the most enduring, 3 of the most important principles were the golden rule, remarkable work ethics, and consistent convictions. Consistent convictions. The golden rule, basically, he put that out from Matthew 7:12. "Do to others what you'd want them to do to you." And this is what he said: "Treat people better than what they want to be treated." The Scripture says, "Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you." But his interpretation was to take it a step further and say, "Do to them more than what they expect." Okay? And, this would come out, especially, when he's interacting with customers. His employees would pay particular attention to customers with high needs. Now, high needs is just a fancy word of disabled people. So if they see a disabled person coming in, they would run up to that person, make sure they are settled down, and they get their order, really fuss over the person. If it's raining, the employees were trained to go to the car with an umbrella, get the customer from the car, take them into the restaurant, and take them back from the restaurant to the car. That was the type of customer service which was built on this biblical principle, the golden rule. Remarkable work ethics. We've already seen that at the age of 8, he was already busy at work and helping to put food on the table. At the age of 10, he started the paper route. At the age of 25, that's when he had come back from the war, so meaning he had gone to the war when he was much younger than 25. But at the age of 25, that's when he opened the first dwarf grill. And then he worked 24, we normally say 24/7, but he worked for 24/6. Only 6 days, but full 24-hour shifts. Consistent convictions. He says nothing upsets a customer more than changing the goalposts all the time. In fact, it's not just the customer, even employees. If you keep changing the goalposts. So he says one of the key successes to his story is that he was very consistent in what he thought, what he did. People knew what he got. Okay? For instance, he rested on the Lord's Day. You want to see Samuel Truett on Sunday? You'll find him at church teaching Sunday school, even when he became a billionaire, teaching a Sunday school of 13-year-olds. Female workers who constituted, a good segment of his employees were given off on Saturday so that they could be with the family. Like I said, he taught Sunday school to 13-year-olds. Now, how does mission-minded perspective to entrepreneurship look like? How does it look like? Well, we can talk about Chick-fil-A until tomorrow. But allow me to just mention a few things that he did which personified his mission-mindedness. He started what they call wind-shaped camps. Wind-shaped camps were launched by Truett in 1985, and this was to create fun and faithful summer places for campers, that is for kids who are now, they have closed school, they don't have anything to do, so he created this space that kids could come and play, and have fun. But also their families could come and have fun with their children. He was very high on family values. So he created an environment where families could learn about Jesus in a more Christ-centered environment. And these wind-shaped camps served about 30,000 people per year, and that's not including the 700 staff. Now, in all he's doing, there was always an element of evangelizing. To get these 700 staff, he would go to colleges. He would send his people to colleges where they would have these interviews and, to ensure that these are the right people. He would vet them. He would fingerprint check them to see that there are no pedophiles and stuff like that, because they'll be dealing with kids, and in the process, he shared the gospel. So it wasn't the company Chick-fil-A that was sharing the gospel, but it was, him and his staff that were sharing the gospel. So how does mission-mindedness look like? Here's a man who has made his money through being an entrepreneur, and he's putting up wind-shaped camps to encourage children to come, to encourage families to come, so that the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ can be preached. And then he also had a foundation called Winship Homes. Now, Winship Homes was founded on Christ-centered principles as well. This was established in the 90s, and basically it was a group care program. Now, the group care program was that it took in kids who were battered left, right, and center, who had no hope in the world, probably been abused. He took them in, put them in homes with foster parents, and he taught those foster parents from Scripture so that they were well-sounded and they could actually handle or deal with the children that were coming in into these homes. So it's called a group care program because it would be a group of kids, 12 to 20 kids in one house with foster parents, and they would try and nurture these children. And on Sundays, these foster parents would take those children to church. They would take them to church. So you can see how Samuel Truett is not necessarily, calling his company a Christian company, but certainly you can see how his company is applying the biblical principles and thereby being a mission-minded or having a mission-minded perspective to entrepreneurship. In 2007, he launched another program called Foster Care Program. Now, this was slightly different from the group care program in that this was more like the traditional foster care where, he would take in children on a temporary basis who are maybe some parent had gone missing or there's a case of abuse. Child care brings the children into this foster care. He would keep them until, they're ready to go back. Or for some who didn't have anywhere to go, he would keep them permanently. And once he kept them permanently, he would actually pay for them to even go to college. And some would actually refuse to, because at the age of 18 in the States, you can go back, you're an adult, you can stay alone. Some would opt to continue staying at the foster home. So that is how a mission-minded perspective to entrepreneurship looks like. But apart from that, Chick-fil-A has done a lot of giving in local communities where the Chick-fil-A operators come from. They come from local communities. So in other words, if you have a Chick-fil-A in Kawata, that person actually resides in Kawata. So he knows the customers, he knows the people and that kind of thing. And, these operators were encouraged, they were trained to support their local communities, and some of the initiatives, support for the troops, they would have a day where they would appreciate the troops who are fighting wherever they're fighting, bring daddies and daughters together for what they called a date night. Chick-fil-A also had a program called Leader Academy, where they would actually go to high schools and, get, students on that program to train them in life skills. Restaurant team membership scholarships, these are initiatives now for employees who wanted to better themselves, who wanted to get a college education or a degree. He would give them scholarships. Community grants, used to give community grants to the communities where these Chick-fil-A operated from. A True Inspiration Award, this was an initiative where the operators themselves, they would recommend or nominate an NGO, a deserving NGO that, once they have nominated them, they vet the NGO, they would be given, money, and this money ranged from $50,000 to $350,000. No small amount for an NGO. And then also Chick-fil-A had an initiative called Shared Table, where they got food. This is an idea maybe our elder can adopt with Hungry Lion. There was so much wastage in the food industry that a lot of the food would go to a landfill. But what they started doing was they would get this food and give it to homeless people. They would give it to needy people. So they called it Shared Table. Suffice to say that there are so many things that Chick-fil-A did. There's so many worthy causes that they gave that if I were to go through all of them, like I said, we'll be here until tomorrow. I think the picture that ought to be becoming very clear in our minds is the fact that here's an entrepreneur who has, undergirded his company documents with biblical principles and does not see any conflict between biblical principles and business practice. You can see that he's not only talking the talk, but he's walking the walk as well. He's walking the walk. So you can see what mission-minded perspective that he had towards his business, towards his entrepreneurial ventures. When we come to the corporate social responsibility, I picked this from the social responsibility of corporate social responsibility report for 2021. They have basically 4 areas in which they reach out to the community. The first one is caring for people. We've seen a bit of that, but they have a program or initiative called Together Fund, Chick-fil-A Together Fund. Now this is an initiative for employees where they've put monies together and the company has put monies together in case there's a funeral, in case there's an adversity among the employees, they can get money from that Together Fund. Chick-fil-A employee volunteer program, employees, on their off days would actually volunteer to work in the community, whether it's teaching kids, mentoring kids, that kind of thing. They believed that their employees, they had learned something from the company and they ought to impart. So they had been developed and are still going through the development process, but it was incumbent on them to also develop others. Fostering connection and community. Fostering connection and community, this is where, you have neighbors that you don't know about. You've lived 10, 15 years and you've never spoken to your neighbor. So Chick-fil-A had a program where, people would come together over a meal and get to know each other. So that built the wellness of the community, okay? And I wouldn't be surprised if in such events, the word of God was being preached, because each time a Chick-fil-A is being opened, he would always invite a pastor to come and pray and preach, So I know that he probably would not have wasted this effort or this opportunity. Celebrating great work and each other. So if there are commendable things that have been done in the community that need to be noticed, they will be, mentioned, and Chick-fil-A would get involved in recognizing those people behind those things. So the second pillar, the first one was caring for people. The second pillar under corporate social responsibility is caring for our communities. So in 2021, they reached out to 900 schools and engaged them in the Leader Academy. So they got these students, taught them life skills, taught them leadership principles just to get them ready for life. Strengthening the cities and neighborhoods we serve, they would work with the police to keep the communities, the neighborhoods safe from crime, helping non-profits organizations scale up their impact. Non-profit organizations play a vital role, and Chick-fil-A saw that they could help the non-profit organizations have a greater impact by, building capacity in them. Developing young leaders, these are some of the things that they did in the community. Caring for others through food, this was a third pillar. Serving great food, people can feel good about. So they didn't sell, when I say food would go to waste, it's not the junk, that stuff that people have left, then you gather it and say, okay, let's give it to the homeless. But they would serve good food, food that you, the customer, would actually spend money buying that food. That's the food that they would share with people. They celebrated donating 12 million meals, upholding high standards for our food. That is something that was very, very clear from the get-go, and that is one of the reasons why he even decided to open his own outlet, because of the lack of hygiene in some of the places they were selling. So you can imagine that in his own outlets, in the conveniences, they were spick and span. Getting to know your neighbors, I've already talked about that. So the last pillar is caring for our planet. And how do they do this? Well, Chick-fil-A, like I said, they reduce on food. They recycle what they can recycle. What can't be recycled, they'll obviously give it away. Acting as good stewards of the planet. You remember that in the corporate purpose, this was there. It was enshrined there. It was in their document to act as good stewards. So this would actually, that corporate purpose, it actually undergirded, it governed, the way they made decisions. Whether it's, coming up with a menu. In fact, that's another thing about menus. Most companies would like to expand their menus. They like to keep it simple, but of high quality. So being good stewards is something that can be seen in the menu, in the atmosphere, in the ambience of the restaurant outlet. It's something you cannot miss. Building on sustainable best practices. This refers to their restaurants. They started building, after being in the mall for a long time, they started building standalone outlets. And the way these outlets were being built, they were energy efficient. You didn't need so much light because they used the natural light. So these are some of the ways in which they show their care for our planet. So basically that gives you an idea of what a mission-minded perspective to entrepreneurship looks like, gives you an idea the kind of things they did in their community, but it also speaks of how they served the communities. And this is the model they used. It's called SERVE model, the acronym SERVE, which means see the future, engage and develop others, reinvent continuously, value results and relationships, embody the values. And you can see that if you've been picking up one or two items that I've been saying, you can see that, so engage and develop others. The Academy Leader Program, the Leader Academy Program, That's engaging and developing others. Reinvent continuously. You are always trying to come up with smart ways of doing things. Value, results, and relationships. In fact, he's got a book called Value, or rather Principles Before Profits. You know, he believed that principles and relationships matter more than profits. By the way, by not opening on Sunday, he was losing $100 million per year. So he could have opened on Sunday and made that. And he was told, oh, you're a fool. How can you miss out on this amount of money? But you can see in the model that he values results and relationships. And when we're talking about results, we're not talking about financial results. Though they're important, they are important because for him to do what he did, the financial results needed to be positive. But he considered other things more important than money. And the values that he puts in the strategic plan, it's not for show and tell. Okay, so what are your values? Oh yeah, integrity, honesty, empathy, and things like that. But meantime, you don't do those things. And your people don't even know that your company has those values. So how do you expect them to actually even keep those values? But he believed that these values we have set, they must be part of you. Okay, so you have to embody those values. They have to become a part of you. So this is the model that he used to serve the communities. This is the model that he used to run the company. And we've talked a lot about, Chick-fil-A. Maybe now is a time for us to have a sense, what is this Chick-fil-A? What made him so much money? Well, this is what made him money. This is what, as simple as it looks, the Americans just love this thing. They love this chicken sandwich. And, when people started talking about healthy eating and stuff like that, remember one of the things is, one of the values in the model is to continuously reinvent. So from a chicken from a chicken sandwich, they came up with a Chick-fil-A salad, I know that this is quite appetizing. Anyhow, I just wanted to give you a visual of what Chick-fil-A produces and sells. In conclusion, let me repeat what Samuel Truett said when he was asked about that business model. I said, look, you can't make money. You can't make money using that model. He says, we all know that the scorecard of any business is the profit it produces. Without profits, we cannot take care of our employees, our families, or contribute to the betterment of our communities. The question is, how do we balance the pursuit of profit and personal character? For me, that is Samuel Truett, for me, I find that balance by applying biblical principles. I see no conflict between biblical principles and business practices. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was quite riveting for me, at least. Maybe being in the industry. But I think it was riveting in the way it was presented. Thank you very much. What we'll do is we're going into our last session now, so I'll give a 5-minute break for the stage to be properly set. So just 5 minutes. So we're beginning our panel session at 4:20. which is 6 minutes actually. Yeah, 6 minutes from now, so 20 past 4. Now this session is dependent on questions from the floor. So I'm hoping that from your discussions, from what you've heard here, presented here in 3 presentations, you have questions, practical questions, and also you can share your practical experiences as well for everybody to learn. I haven't seen that document for the registration. Has it passed around? It has. Okay. All right. Great. Okay, still going around. Okay. Right. Let's take a 5-minute, 6-minute break. 20 past 4. We begin the panel presentation. Thank you. and many more. Next page if it's there. Next page, next page. There you go, just blow it up a bit. So there's different types of groupings. There's accountants, agriculture, agro products, auto sales, banking, finance, carpenters, church, dentists, doctors, education, electricians, farmers, flooring, financial services, health and wellness, insurance, internet, and so the list will grow as we go. So do you want to just quickly say something about it? The microphone is there, you can use that one. You can use this one.
Okay. Good afternoon. This idea was birthed by the Mugalas, something that has been in the making for some time now. And the intention is for Christians with businesses to have a page in this directory. So that if I'm looking for a plumber, I must get a plumber from Jerusalem, not from Egypt. And that's the idea, so that we are able to keep the resources within, and then we build these businesses together. And that's the intention, and we would like it to come to life. It's been on the drawing board for some time now. But our desire is that maybe by mid next year, it's up and running as people subscribe and they pay and advertise, and then we have a listing of all the people, whatever you are doing in this. And it's not just for the Reformed, but even of other like faith can be part of it, so that we create a pool where we can go and get these things, unlike what's happening. We buy from everybody else except ourselves. And that ought to change. Basically, that's the gist of this idea. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you see the adverts going out, you will know what that is about. I have quite a few requests from my company for people coming to UTH from other towns. And I often then call our doctors, Christian doctors, and say, please, can you help? Because it's very difficult there. You can be there and not get service. But our Christian doctors who are quite senior always help out, and then we find a way. But the point is, we are looking for a Christian doctor to help us. Now we are looking for a plumber to help us. You know what happens with builders now? Like one of our brothers was sharing his group. You employ builders, but they are building on your money also, their own building. Now we're looking for Christian men and women to do those things so that we don't have to do these, DEC type checks. We are making sure that all the money is going into the project. You want a Christian there who is accountable to God, first of all. But that's what that directory will be about. If you have a business, you register there. It will be online. I'm sure that's the easiest way. And there, you have a catalog of what your business actually does. What is your expertise? Who is on your board? Who are your trained people? And so on. And a good directory, therefore. And hopefully, if it works well, you'll find that, everyone in the world is also looking, even if they're not Christians, they're also looking for very reliable people. And they can't get them. Mechanics, builders, maids, handymen, accountants, lawyers, and so on. So hopefully they will know if I go to this directory, one of these companies, and I get those, I'm sure I'm getting value for my money. And then the name of God is raised high. And the testimony of the church is raised high. Okay, thank you. So I did ask Mrs. Chembela to prepare an answer for our first question. So I will ask that first question, and then we'll have questions from the floor. I already have one here. If you want to write it down and pass it on, that's fine. If you want to read it yourself, that's also fine. But this was the question for Mrs. Chembela, and I asked her particularly to speak because she wasn't standing up to present. You have started a businesses before. kindly tell us about the documentation process with PACRA, ZRA, and generally the regulatory authorities, and there are many. And we're talking about Zambia here in the main. Why do people cut corners, do you think? And in Zambia, can you succeed without cutting corners? And what principles do you keep in mind therefore? So I'll ask it again. There's a lot of documentation in Zambia. The ease of doing business, they're trying to make it better, but it's still far from being as good as it should be. Part of it is this issue of you can be sent from pillar to post trying to get this documentation done. I mean, I was trying to get sorted out land yesterday, the Ministry of Lands. If I didn't know the sister in Christ who is there, they were throwing me from pillar to post. I was supposed to now, yesterday I paid, then the guy told me, no, we closed today, you can only come between Monday and Wednesday to finally get the final document. When I went back to the sister, she walked over to the office and she brought the final document. Now, the question is, why, tell us about these processes in your experience of starting a business. Then why do people cut corners, and can you succeed in Zambia without cutting these corners? And what principles do you keep in mind therefore?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. So in terms of the documentation needed or the process, what I'm going to do is I'll give like a general overview, then I'll also give my own experience. So in terms of the process, when you want to set up a company, you have to start with the PACRA. So the first step you do is you do a name search. That's very, very important because some of us, probably when you're growing up, you are saying, if I have a business, I'll name it, I'll give it this name with a catchy name. So if you don't do that, like for example, before I started a business, because of what I went through, I used to say, when I have a business, I'll name it Pengojani. Then when I was going somewhere, then I saw a shop, it was written Pengojani. So when you go to PACRA with the same kind of name, PACRA will reject the name. So to avoid wasting time, you have to do a name search. You can do that on PACRA. So after you've done a name search, you need to go for name clearance.
Just say what PACRA is.
So you need to do, so the next stage is called the name clearance. What is involved?
PACRA, what is PACRA?
Okay, in terms of the full names, I can't remember what they stand for, but it has to do with the patent. Yeah.
Yes? Patents and companies?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's patent of company. Yeah. Yeah, something like this. I'm sure most of you know what it means. Yeah. So then the next stage is to do a submission of the name clearance. So you need to come up with the 3 names, your favorite names, starting with your first name, favorite name, second and third. Then submit to PACRA for approval or for clearance. So PACRA will take about 90 days to get back to you. So yeah, so once you receive the clearance and PACRA are happy, they give you a go-ahead that you can go ahead and name your business with the name you want. Then now you can do the registration of the business. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can do the registration of the business. Then there are 4 types of businesses. So you can open, I think Dr. Mgala mentioned them in his presentation. Yeah. So there is a sole trader. So a sole trader is an easy one. It's very simple, not tedious, just involves one person. Probably what you need is just the NRC, where you live, and then you can open a business. But the only disadvantage with a sole trader is you are not separate from the business. When you suffer a loss, when you, like maybe for example, you borrowed money and you fail to pay, people will come and grab your properties, so you lose everything. So that's a disadvantage of a sole trader. Then you've got the partnership. So partnership involves 2 or more people coming together. But the law requires that certain businesses, you have to do them as partnership. Like for example, medical practitioners, accounting, lawyers, you need to do a partnership. And you need to come up with an agreement, like how your business is going to be run or governed. Then you've also got a limited a limited company. For a limited company, you just need 2 or more people. For this one, the advantage of this one, the business and your properties, or individuals and your properties, they are different. They are separate. So if you suffer any loss, people won't come and get your belongings or your properties. Yeah. But it's a bit tedious. You need like the articles of association, how your business will be governed. Yep. Then you've also got I think a public. I think for this one, for the public, this is now where you've got, you can have share orders where they can come and buy shares in your company. Yeah. Then after you've done that with the PACRA, your company is registered. So PACRA is now synchronized with the ZRA. So once your company is registered, you automatically get the TPN from ZRA. Yeah. So with before I move to ZRA, I think it's important I mention that in terms of the registration of the company, you can go to PACRA or you can do it online. Yeah. Same with so ZRA, now you've got the TP number. So you can actually go now to ZRA. So for ZRA, now because you need to pay taxes. So what will determine the kind of tax you pay is the type of the business you are doing. So there are types of taxes. There is the turnover tax, there is income tax, there's withholding tax, property transfer tax, and also withholding tax. Then after that, after you're done with the registration with ZRA, ZRA will send you, will register you for the type of tax. Then at the end of the year, they also give you a tax clearance certificate. The tax clearance certificate is very important because it shows that you are tax compliant. And if you're also trying to do business with other institutions, they require a tax clearance certificate. If you don't have one, you may not do business. Even when you want to open a bank account, they do require a tax clearance certificate, and also incorporation of certificates from PACRA. So it's important that you get your documentation right. Then after you've done that, you can now register for NAPSA. For NAPSA, that is you've got employees. Sometimes when you're starting a business, your business is slow, so you may not have employees, so maybe there's no need of registering employees with NAPSA. But once you have employees, you have to register with the NAPSA. Then the last stage, I think even the council, we shouldn't forget the council, the city council. Yeah. You're supposed to pay the business levy. So you're supposed to get a trading license from the council. Otherwise, if you want to have a business, a trading license, you'll be running away from the council. I've seen a lot of people running away from the council, even these people with my booths everywhere. I've got a Kantemba at home. They require you to pay business levy and also have a trading license. Yeah. Then from my experience, when I started my business, I think what I did was, I didn't want to, somebody told me you can do it online, but I really wanted to go to PACRA and understand what really happens there. So when I went there, I was very fortunate. I found this lady. So I spoke to her. She was very nice to me. So she took me all the processes. And then she said, can you come another day so that we continue with the process? So I said, I don't have time to come. Everything has to be done today. So she did everything for me and helped me with the documentations. And I think I got everything the same day. And she became my friend. And you know when you help people. And the elder sister ended up marrying one of the people in our church because she was nice to me. Yeah, and we became friends. Yeah, so when you're nice to people, yeah. Also, I also preach the gospel to her. So when you're nice to people, they're also nice to you. Yeah. Then why do...
Cut corners.
Yeah. So why do people cut corners? Sometimes the process is very slow. I'll give an example. Like I'm into money lending. So you need people to do the documentation for you. You need a lawyer sometimes. And then also just submitting, because you have to go to Banja Street Court. So when you go there, they give you a date to go. When you go there, they'll tell you, no, come tomorrow. Come tomorrow, come tomorrow. Sometimes you even feel lazy to go there. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons. The process is very slow. I remember one time, I think I did register, but now the renewal. So if you don't renew, there will be a penalty. So there's a difference between registering and a renewal of a license. So there's a time, I think, I was supposed to register. I was supposed to pay, I was supposed to do the renewal in January. I ended up doing the renewal in August because I think I got tired of going there. But nonetheless, whether you don't pay in that year, at the time you're going to get another one, they'll charge you. So I was like, maybe I'll just pay when I go to do the next one because I was really tired of the process. I go there, no, the judges, they're on break, they're not here. So you really get tired and you don't have the time in the world to keep on going there. So maybe that's one of the reasons people cut corners. But nonetheless, I managed to get the license. Then the second, another reason is there is bribery and the corruption. People will say there is nothing for free. So if they do something, you have to bribe them. Because sometimes the process will be slow, and then other people, if you don't give them money, they won't do anything for you. So you find that probably you're in a hurry to start a business, and you can only start once maybe the license is ready. But if it's not ready, taking maybe 1 year, so people will be tempted to cut the corners. Then another reason is the cost of doing business in Zambia is very slow. Then at this juncture, or at this point, I want to mention that ZRA requires that everyone pays tax. Whether it's like a small cantemba, I think they've got a slogan which says, my tax, and our destiny. Yeah. And if you've seen some of the billboards, I think they've put maybe a woman selling tomatoes. Yeah. So meaning the government wants to broaden the tax base and requires that everyone pays tax. So all of us have to be tax compliant, whether it's like a small cantemba or not. But the reason why people cut corners, the cost of doing business is very high. Talk of most of the business, they are survival-oriented. Yeah, they are survival-oriented. It's hands to mouth. You can't manage with all the documentation, the processes, all these. So you find that because the cost of doing business is very high, so people will just, they won't register they won't comply. So that's the reason why people cut the corners. So you find somebody who's selling vegetables every day. They've been doing that business maybe for 10 years. It's a survival-oriented business. They don't grow. They just survive. And then you'd expect them to pay tax. They won't even have time. Yeah. Then, I think those are the reasons. Yeah. Then
Okay. Can I ask Dr. Mugala to take the last one, which is the principles? I think you gave us some. What, therefore, are the principles that you don't, therefore, do that? I mean, you find corruption, you find elongated systems for the purposes of creating that corruption. Therefore, what principles do you keep in mind? I mean, I had an instance where it's a ministry which you are supposed to report people to, so it's a police ministry. And we were trying to see the minister, and the PAs wanted the 10,000 kwacha to see the minister. Now, this is an institution you're supposed to report them to. So how do you report them to the institution you're supposed to report to? So we couldn't get anywhere. We couldn't see the minister for 3 months. We couldn't see the minister. And we were not small people, but they wanted money to see the minister. So what principles do you use? What can you put in mind? You gave us, I think, the red lights and so on, but what principles do you use? Is it on? Let's use this one.
Thank you very much. I think time doesn't give us space to talk about everything, but I think awareness first, as we mentioned, that we are living in a corrupt and fallen world. I think it's important that that awareness is very, very alive with each one of us. The business environment in which we play is extremely corrupt and it's extremely fallen. It's a dark world. We are basically in a world where the light has been dimmed or switched off. Then secondly, I think like I mentioned in the presentation, I think you need to establish that right at the start of the business, your code of ethics in terms of how you're going to deal with business. Understand who you are, you're a believer, you're a Christian, and being called as the salt and the light of the world, you raise your ethical bar very, very high, so much that when the real situation comes, what I call when you meet basically the situation, it's not an issue of you debating, it's not an issue of you discussing, it's an issue of you being guided by your principles. Now, let me put it this way, that it's not an easy thing, like I gave an example when I was doing the presentation. And also, let it be very clear that it may be your only contract you may have maybe for the rest of your, or for the rest of the year, or maybe you've been chasing something. And to get it, it may only be, the only way to get it is through bending your ethics or your Christian principles. But again, you go back to the beginning. The beginning is basically as God has laid it, that as a believer, they are clearly laid down principles of doing business. For me, without going into much details, the bottom line is simply this. In Zambia, we have a tender procedure system, and we obey the laws of the land by simply going through that tender procedure system. You have to know it, understand it, before you tender for anything. I've seen the wife to one of the brothers, she's here. When the COVID time came, I was asked to look for a friend who has a business who can provide the COVID things. And I went to him, and he put together the whole thing, and then I took it to Ministry of Health, and they said, oh, this is extremely cheap. Why is this applying at this price? I said, he has costed, and he says this is the price at which he should sell. I think it was the masks. Then they said, no, tell him to double the price, and then the difference will be ours, and we'll make sure that he gets his contract. So obviously, that was the end of that contract. He never got it because it was a simple no to him. He couldn't see himself doing that. So we come back to the Joseph principle. How can I do such a thing? Because it contravenes basically the basic principles of my faith. So anything that goes beyond the basic principles of your faith, for me, it's a no-go area. Maybe I shouldn't go too much in detail, but that's basically my principle.
Thank you very much. So we live in a depraved world with depraved people. We must be the ones that say, I'm not going to do the masks. I'm not going to pay the 10,000 kwacha. I'm going to keep coming until you sign the document. Or, for that matter, I'm going to report this matter, even if the consequences are there. We must be the ones that actually change that, because that's what God has asked us to do. Let's have questions from the floor. I do have one here, but questions from the floor? Anybody wants to ask? We have a microphone. Okay, I'll read the one I have here. How do you register a missionary community initiative? Is that correct? How do you register a missionary community initiative? What is the process? Does any one of you have an idea? I'm not sure myself. Any of you have an idea how to register a missionary community initiative? I would imagine it comes under the Registrar of Societies, wouldn't it? In this instance. But we can find out. Okay. Yes.
I'm assuming missionary what?
Community
initiative. So it's a mission in the community. I'm assuming
yes. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Chick-fil-A?
Chick-fil-A, yeah.
Okay. Actually, what she elaborated, all the structures she elaborated can be used as a channel to do that. But what I've seen is that you can have actually have a form. In Zambia, it's not very common, but in the way in which they are done, it's like a foundation. This is basically you're establishing an NGO. Most are done through NGOs, and the advantages of NGOs. If you are doing a mission-oriented activity, the beneficiaries will be the community. Automatically, for ZRA purposes, you don't pay taxes. You get exempted from taxes. But unfortunately, if you employ people, they pay NAPSA. NAPSA doesn't exempt. But most of us, we see ZRA, we're trying to avoid paying tax. So that gives you that advantage. But it also opens doors for, grants. It also opens doors for community activities that can pour in their resources. It also opens doors for, the volunteers to come and assist you in running that. So you open the resource base that may not be available for a limited company, and so forth and so on. So that the NGO model has become like the channel mostly for that purpose. And then you have two windows where you can open that. So registrar of societies would be the default, but you also have the Ministry of Lands, which also registered under certain circumstances. For example, you want to own property in order to carry out your activities. You'll need to register that through Ministry of Lands in order for it not to pay taxes. So there will be two sources where mostly you can register your business. Other than that, you can form a cooperative. A cooperative with like-minded people, you come together and you say, can we work together in order to deal with this situation? Once again, you can establish that. You can actually form a company under cooperatives. You can also go to the Register of Societies. You can also go to Ministry of Lands for purposes of forming a cooperative. But that also has some requirements. You must have a minimum number of people and so forth and so on. So I think, in short, those are the three main avenues. But having said that, you have companies like Trade Kings, whose foundation, it's basically a foundation, and it's very elaborate. It operates almost like a limited company. So you can use other channels also, but basically the NGO model is the main one for that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a comment from the floor about this matter of corruption and what can you do about it. One of the things I said was you can report, there are usually consequences to that. But the comment is that most institutions have integrity committees now to address complaints of unethical conduct by employees. So stand your ground, but also report such to integrity committees. Obviously, blatant corruption can be reported directly to ACC, Anti-Corruption Commission, or the police, or in fact DEC, Drug Enforcement Commission. So that's just a comment, and that is true. I know of quite a few. I mean, we ourselves have that. ZESCO has it as well, integrity committees that you can actually report conduct to. So quite right. There's, okay, a question there, if you guys take up the microphone. While you do that, Saidi, you tend to be an action-oriented man, so Dr. Mgala said I should answer this because we are the elders who were supposed to answer this from this church. But I'll hand it to you first and then I'll come in. So think about it as the question is being asked by Boblin. This question, the gentleman says he's attended a lot of our seminars from last year. And clearly there is a foundation of theology being set, a theological doctrinal foundation for how to act and react in these spheres that we've determined, the 6 seminars. How should Christians act and react in those frameworks? Each seminar, he has seen everyone coming up with, let's act now, let's do something now, let's form something now, and it seems to end kind of there. His argument is, isn't it right that first we build the foundation, the theological foundation, and then we act, because then you don't have legs, then you're going to fall. But the rider to that is, do you then wait? Because we've said 5 years of the theological setting. We're in the 2nd year, we've got 3 more years to go. So do we wait for the 3 years before we actually act? Or is it possible to begin to act in some instances now? So think through that and then come up with the answer. And I'll support you or not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so before I ask my question, maybe just to comment, in case we didn't get the name for PACRA, it's Patent and Company Registration Agency. I think that's what PACRA is there for. Now, my question is, I think in the presentations area by Dr. Mgala, and I think also in our group, it's quite clear that capital is not just about money. It's not just about financial capital. I think there are other forms of capital, and I think what was coming out was, what was used was, I think, relationship capital. I think to that we can add social capital, we can add networking, and so forth. Now, I just want the panel to just comment on where do we draw the line between that relationship capital and not to be seen to be favoring friends and relatives, because that becomes a vice. So where do we draw the line? Thank you.
Okay, can I throw this one to Mrs. Chakonda? Because you run a large insurance corporation, so and you come across a number of employees, a number of organizations coming to you. Could you try and tackle that one? And can I also ask Engineer Chiwala to tackle a little bit, because you've been at the levels of PS even, so how are you managing that you don't favor and you keep it straight?
Okay,
Need to push it up. Yes. Yeah.
all right, thank you so much. Yes, there is a very thin line in terms of definition between favoritism, because you know the partners you are working with, and that of really dealing with them with utmost good faith. So normally you find that in organizations you have your conduct, your policies and procedures of how you maybe sign up a partner and work with a party. And usually this one also you'd want to say, maybe you have a related party policy. When you want to work with someone that you know, maybe in a business arrangement, be it a contract or that, what are the guidelines that you have? You should be able to have them clearly set out. And that should help you. To start with, I think they should basically meet the minimum. And if anything, they should exceed. They should really be outstanding as to why you want to work with these partners that maybe are related to you. And then also, you should be able to declare that. That normally keeps you above board. Because there are times when we disadvantage ourselves to say we can't work with this because there's that relationship. Meanwhile, maybe they can provide the best service and they have the best skills. So how do you work around your circumstances to see that it's done without any favors? And that's where it calls for such things like a policy in place and declaration to say, okay, we are working with this party because they'll give us 1 and 2 advantages, but I know them from church. I go to church with them, or I know we interact in this atmosphere. That also helps.
Thank you.
I hope it answers the question.
I think you need to pass on the same mic. That other one is problematic.
Thank you very much. Sometime last year, I did a presentation on transformational leadership, the case of Singapore and lessons for Zambia. And in that paper, I was able to outline what Zambia has lost in the last 30 years since we became a multi-party democracy. One of the key things, Elder, is meritocracy. Prior to 1991, we had a system here of selecting the best students from wherever they're coming from, Shangombo and wherever. They didn't have to know a PS. They would just go to examination council and pick the top. And the CCM would sponsor a lot of them based on meritocracy. So for me, to answer this question, we just say, are you the best in the area? If I'm the CEO of an organization and we have an interview and my wife has attended and she's the best, she gets the job without even winking. And that's a missing link I see in my country. The whole issue of meritocracy, I think we are beginning to bend and lowering the standards. And we can learn very well from Singapore, a tiny country that rode on meritocracy and where they are. In 35 years, they were able to catapult themselves from third world to first world because of just choosing the best. Are you the best engineer? Are you the best accountant? Are you the best insurance person? Because through that mechanism, you level the playing field. We must not use no other measurements except meritocracy, meritocracy, meritocracy. That's the way I would answer it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My own experience heading my organization is similar because I have the principle. There's no way you will not employ a relative, no way. You have too many relatives. There's just no way you will avoid doing that, number one. Number two, if you don't employ a relative, like he says, they're the best, but because their relatives don't get the job, you're also being unfair. And God will judge you for it too, because they're the best candidate for the job. However, I say to those I employ who are my friends or relatives or give contracts or business or whatever, I will employ you, but that's the last we discuss. What happens to you after that in the system is got nothing to do with me. And I still have people phoning me, no, uncle, they are now about to discipline me. Then I phone the manager, discipline the fellow now. Because it's got nothing to do with me now. We employed you, you were the best candidate. You must now run the race and run it well. And if you continue to be the best candidate, going up has nothing to do with me. Now, it has perceptions, let's be honest. People will look and say, yeah, because of, yeah, because of, yeah, because of. But again, do you then say, kick out the person who's best candidate because others will simply say, yeah, because of, and then you choose the second or third best, and then your organization, therefore, fails in productivity and performance. So you as a Christian must be very, very clear. I think I liked what Dr. Mgala said. Beliefs are what we hold on to. Conviction is what holds us in those moments and keeps us firm to the right principle and the right position, because at one day we will stand before God and be judged for what was your conviction and did you follow it. So I think that's what I need to apply. I mean, it's not an easy thing, not as easy as it sounds, but it's a principle to apply. I agree entirely with what the panelists have said. A very good question. Any more? We are winding down. Yes, over here. Are there any more? Saidi, you remember that question, eh? Any others, so that we know? Okay.
I would just like to hear from each of the panelists what they have done. They're all business people, but we haven't heard so much about their own journeys I know there's no time, but maybe 2-3 minutes. What have you done, and what has been the biggest challenge getting to where you are now?
Okay, that's a fault of myself and the committee. The committee had asked me to do bios for them and present them so that you can see them, and we didn't do that. We didn't present them there, but we can have a very quick, very brief, 1 minute perhaps, for each. What exactly are you? Where have you? Not necessarily the challenges, that would be too long.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Mgala will give 20 challenges, so rather what have you done? I think Dr. Mgala we introduced, so the other 4.
Okay. Thank you. Well, from my end, it's more of being a partner to my husband. I'm employed full-time, but my husband is a full-time businessman. And there's a number of business activities we've been in. But the one that has left us with a lot of lessons is when we ran the Minelands Agri shops. We had a number of shops, I must say. Maybe I would say in almost all the provinces, what do you call them? The capital cities, yeah. So we were into trading, yeah, agro implements and inputs. Yeah, we started from 0, grew very big, and then we had a decline. Basically, we closed. And from there, we learned a lot of lessons, especially growing the business. The start was okay, but when it grew, I think that's where we started facing a lot of challenges. Issues of people, the skills, and then the issue of unfaithfulness is what really killed us. But for me, when I look back, what really was the biggest challenge was our internal processes were not in place. The business outgrew our own systems. And I think we were slow to react to it to ensure that we have our internal controls and systems to manage the business. I think it was the fear of delegation and not really empowering, delegation and entrusting too much, where you think you want to control everything. And so with that growth, and then we didn't see the competition coming, by the time we realized the big companies had already started running the similar shops, and then we couldn't match up to that. Thank you.
Okay, for me, I'm an accountant by profession. Then I'll just, it's a long story. I think it may be for one day, but I'll try to summarize if I can. Yeah. Okay, so for me, I've always been, I think since I was a child, I've always been an entrepreneur. And I get this from my dad and my mother, yeah. And they always told me that a job is just a foundation. You have to run around, and I've always done that. I think when I was just in grade 2, yeah. So in terms of the businesses I've done, like the way I started my business, the first business I started was real estate. So the way I started small. I was just sharing my story. So I started small. I was cooking. I think I got a skill. I was cooking chikanda. So what I did is I identified something people can't easily do, and the munkoyo, yeah. So I used to sell it to professionals. When I was with KPMG, I would sell it like to my partners, a lot of professionals from Stanbic, Stanchart, yeah. So the money I was making, and also from chikanda, I was using it to buy blocks. So I got a plot in the garden. Then I did my first mudadada. Then I would also come to, is this Kabwata? I don't know if this is Kabwata. I would sell salaula, I was selling popcorns, I was selling water, I was selling freezes. I even had employees who were doing it for me. So that was the first mudadada I did. I built it from that. Then so I've been progressing, so I've got in I've got in Kalinga, I've got in Chipata compound, in garden, in Kabanana. Now I've gone to Kalingalinga, yeah. So in terms of the real estate, I think for me, really, there's really been no loss. It's really a good business. When I started, like the building materials were very low, so the return will actually be probably in less than 2 years, I would actually get my return. So what I've been doing, I like saying, I moved from like where I do like a dignified business. I started with a chikanda, then now I moved to real estate. Then I really wanted to retire young. I didn't want to retire old. I said at the age of 40, I should actually leave employment. Yeah, so I started the lending business. It was working very well. I was making a lot of a lot of money. I was making a lot of money. I had actually even church members who put in money, I had friends who put in money. And I was very faithful, I was paying them. Then I had about 15 employees. I was working with the communities because I wanted to give back to the community, corporate social responsibility, and also preach the word of God. So I empowered women. So the manager in that job was actually my mate. Yeah, she's very intelligent. I also, like what Dr. Mgala was saying, I always make sure that people who are working with us, they are also actually good. They get a plot, you give them a loan, so that you also develop them. Yeah, you share the blessings. Yeah, so when I employed them, so they actually stole money from me, a lot of money. When I say, because it was people's money, a lot of money. So people now started following me that they needed their money. So even when you explain to them, every time you have to go to explain to them, you'd see like, they'll look at you with talking eyes as if you've stolen their money. Yeah, so but what I did was, I had to get my pension money and pay almost all of them. So probably I paid them about 80% or 90%. Then my husband said, no, you have, I think the other amount, you can share the loss. Yeah, so even after giving the money, even Christians, they were still coming back to me. When are you giving us the remaining money? So probably the balance is just 10,000. Yeah, yeah. So I was saying, no, maybe probably when the business improves, but this time when they come, I'll tell them that I think we need to share the loss. I can't just share the loss alone. I felt so bad that they lose money and then I don't give them. But I never gave up. I had to start from the beginning. I started small, changed the model. I still got my mate. She was probably she was also involved in what was happening. But I looked at the strengths and the weaknesses. She was very nice. She's a nice person, yeah. So I put up controls. Then he started getting collateral. The business is running very well. I don't even have enough capital to give to people who come to borrow. Now I've even got people on the phones. I was just showing her that, like, I need to, I've got a job, but I've actually just resigned. Yeah. Yeah. So I was just telling her that, every time I've got somebody who wants to borrow money, sometimes I don't even answer the phones because it's too busy. Maybe I'll answer them at night. So my business has even grown on the phone. So I've got about maybe 10 people or 12 people who would borrow, and I believe the model I use is a Swift combo model, a very simple model. So in terms of lending, I start from 50 kwacha. Yeah, so people don't have money. So I've seen a need. So I go up to maybe 10,000. Yeah, but then I also interrogate my people who are borrowing money from me. So I've got like certain women. So like when they borrow, they pay in 2 weeks. So I said, maybe these people may be dealing in something else. So I actually followed them and interrogated them what they would do. So the kind of the business they do. So they're involved in rosewood. They sell rosewood, the planks, the timber. Yeah. So they get timber from northwestern province. So they have partnered. They're about 4. So when they spend about 60,000, then they make like maybe a 170. But the problem is they are 4. So they have to share the profit. So I finance those. So I've got different kind of people who come to borrow. The profit is not even enough. But let me mention that I think for these seminars we've had, I think what really changed, or a game changer, I thank God, was the 2 last business seminars we had. I think one was, on the medical fraternity. Then the other one was Chick-fil-A, where we talked about partnering. Yeah. So I saw this opportunity. I think let me summarize. I saw this opportunity, shared with my friends. They were happy with the business proposal I had. So when I told one of my friends that this is a business I want to do. So she works for the bank. She went and borrowed, and we bought the plot. So we did a boarding house. We've done a very big boarding house in Kalingalinga. It's actually done, but the only problem we have, those are the challenges, ZESCO. So we are waiting for ZESCO to put the power there, then it becomes operational. Then I've also partnered with my sister. So done a boarding house, I think in 2 weeks. I also didn't have money, so I spoke to my sister. So my sister managed to get like an advance salary from our office, and we also got like from the village banking. So it has been done in 2 weeks. It is at the roof level, hoping in January it will be done. Then how do I come in, like to help pay out the loans? Because I've got rental income, so I'll tell them like every month I can be paying. So for me, I thank the elders for these seminars. Because in the past, I just used to see them, oh, they're just these seminars. And then I also read a lot of books. I read Think Big, The Richest Man in Babylon, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. They really never changed. They really never changed me. I think for me, what's really changed me is the 2 last seminars we've had. And I'm not a public speaker. I agreed to be on this seminar as part of the team because I'm the beneficiary of this seminar. So I'm very grateful to the elders. And God bless you.
Thank you. I let her talk on because I find her story fascinating. It's very inspiring.
Yeah. Afternoon once more. My background is civil engineering. I worked in the railway industry. That's where I began the career. Water industry, aviation, road sector. And the road sector, that's where I had the most headache in all my life. Working with President Michael Sat. He was a great president. This is what he told me when I was appointed as CEO for RDA. Said, there are many civil engineers in this country. I've selected you. When we agree on the plan, and you come back to me with an excuse for not having delivered that plan, at the same time, come with a resignation letter. And I think that was the best of the time. Very demanding boss, and he never interfered with us. And looking at that institution, I think that was the best of the time. He really protected us from hooves. Because there was a lot of money. We're being given $700 million every year for roadworks. We started those links Zambia. We started the toll gates. And the idea was that we raise from toll gates not less than $200 million to help maintain the roads. I pray that the money from toll gates will go back to road maintenance, because I just came from Mpongwe. We've used the Mpongo road. The road is very bad and there's a toll gate. Yeah. You are actually not supposed to pay toll fees if that road is not maintained. Yeah. Maybe that's a topic for another day. The other things we've been doing as a family, on family enterprise, is real estate and also farming. We actually began our agricultural business 20 years ago in Kitwe. And we've been bent doing farming. We were doing eggs and also bananas on a commercial scale. For the eggs, what bent us was the cost of feed. It went up by more than 100%. And we had borrowed money from banks, Brother Boblin. Because of eggs, you sell every day. So we are depositing money every day. And the bankers, I thought they loved me. Every 2 weeks, we were going for some lunch. But the day feed cost went up, and we could no longer service the loan. Then I knew who our real friends were. They actually almost possessed the farm. What saved us was FNB. May the Lord bless FNB. They bought off the loan from Barclays and gave us a tenure of 10 years. Barclays' loan was 3 years. They said pay back in 10 years. They also reduced the interest. Barclays' interest was 27%. They gave us at 15%.
Wow.
That's what saved the farm. We didn't do anything wrong, except that the market structure in the environment changed. In fact, I learned one lesson, and the lesson was that things can go wrong. It's no fault of yours. That was a big lesson, and I needed to learn it early in life. Other things we've been doing is also in the avocado sector, avocado space, promoting the commercial cultivation of this avocado. We found out that there are more than 15 different products you can make from one avocado. Beauty things, cosmetic things, oil for cooking, hair oil, and so we are pushing that agenda. But we are also into processing other foods like chili, honey, peanut butter, and twilo, and so on. We found that there is quite some space in value addition. And the Udabota was just showing me earlier in the day, one person that is beginning to package dried tomato that is pounded. 2 months ago, the price of tomato came to how much? 40 kwacha per box. But this country imports tomato puree and tomato sauce. So the point of value addition becomes critical, and that's an area we are seeking to promote and advance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe, is your microphone working? Yeah, okay. So you can say who you are and that last question. So I was in Bernard's office once. He was permanent secretary. And then we were there by appointment because we were being pushed around as ShopRite, and he was a brother. He gave us an appointment to help us out. We're sitting in his office, we're chatting, he's permanent secretary. His office door opens, an officer comes and says, sorry, sir, to interrupt, but the minister has run out of fuel. This was Wednesday. Then Bernard says, okay, so what? So the man says, but he needs fuel. So I said, no, but he's run out. So that means we're waiting for the budget is next week now, the next fuel. So the man says, no, but it's the minister who's run out of fuel. So he said, yes, but so what? So the man goes back, we keep talking, 3 other men come now. And then they say, sir, you know, the minister ran out of fuel. I mean, what if President Sata calls him and what does it do? He's got no fuel. And he said, well, President Sata said, if you run out of fuel on Wednesday, you wait until Monday. So we're not giving the minister fuel. Then these people could not believe this is a man who's... Me, I'm sitting there wondering what's going on. And he refused. And he said, okay, Babota, wait. So I've got a meeting. So just call the entire heads of department. Come, we have another discussion about this matter. Because the point is clear. The parameters were set. The president himself set the parameters. We cannot now change the parameters. And I thought, wow, there's a brother, you know. There's a brother. You can go. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My background, chartered marketer, and I'm a project management profession certified. I've worked in the fast-moving goods market. In short, those who don't know me that far back, that's Dairy Produce Board, which is now Parmalat. I worked for ZCF Insurance. Surprise, surprise, Mrs. Chakonta. Then my last formal employment was with Lafarge. After I left Lafarge, I set up a retail outlet along Chachacha Road. From nothing to, that was in 2003, where I had to borrow money for rent because the landlord wanted money in advance. had to borrow money for rent, and I didn't have anything. I didn't have any money to stock up. But somehow, because of a good name, I was able to get a few products on credit. In fact, I think it's 2 product lines that we eventually opened the shop with. From 2003 to about 2005 or 2006, I had to sell the company because I was given a choice, either you go or you don't go. So I preferred to go, so which meant selling the company. Though that wasn't my first preference, I had to sell because I'd left the company running. It was running fairly well the time that I was running it. But when we were in Switzerland, I was getting call upon call saying, can you send money? Can you send? I said, but when I was there was no one who was sending money. We were paying bills using that structure. So after 3-4 months, I decided to come back and sell the company. Some of you might know one of the brothers who was in a group that bought my company, Mr. Yui, John Yui. He was going to this church. He's now with Kafue. So I had to sell that because I couldn't run it via remote. But when we came back in 2010, 2009 or 2010 thereabouts, I set up another company, this time a consultancy firm that I've been running with since then.
Okay, answer the question now.
The
And that's
question,
the last question.
The question that was asked about, does the person wait for 5 years until the biblical indoctrination is done? An entrepreneur is defined as someone who scans the environment, identifies opportunities, and acts on them. The acting part is very, very important. So if you just identify an opportunity, doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur. So you have to act on it. So you have to act on it even before the 5 years is up. However, having noted the fact that you might still be green behind the ears when it comes to running a business, you do well to surround yourself with people who have gone ahead of you, who have run businesses, and use them as springboards for how best you can run your business. Because the scripture does say, in the multitude of counsel, there is wisdom. So that is one way you can certainly mitigate risk, okay? No business is without risk, but acceptable risk is calculated risk. And you mitigate that by consulting widely with those who have gone before you. So that's the way I would answer that.
Thank you, and I agree with you. I think you don't need to wait for the 5 years. In any case, if you're 70, you'll be 75, you can't even start. So you don't need to wait for 5 years, but just be sure that you have a good biblical foundation, because these principles are real. These challenges are very real. You've heard many examples here. All of us can speak about an example or two. So be very sure. I think there was the brother Abraham, I think he's gone, from Woodlands Baptist, who gave us an example of working under the Mugalas, because they were fairly established, their networking was already done, and there was no harm in working under them, and they were gracious to work together and to help the brother get to where he was. No harm in surrounding yourself or tapping from those who are willing to be partners who are also Christians. So we don't need to wait for them for the action. However, if you are not foundationally sound and the legs are wobbly, you will fall. and you will fall badly. So be very careful about that as well. The doctrinal setting must be done. We are teaching this year about man is fallen. Then there's the redemptive part, which helps that fallen arrangement. So the depravity is there. If you are redeemed, you are the one who does what Bernard did in the office, the example that I just gave. And each one of these has got an example or two. Dr. Mgala was telling us about that as well, where you go and then they're saying cut corners. If you are not foundationally strong, well, that you won't even know there's an orange light which is saying wait. You won't even know there's a red light which is telling you don't cross. Then you will cross and it's too late, and it's very difficult, as we were taught, to come back properly. Very difficult. So be very careful that your foundation is sound. If it's not, team up with those who's sound and partner in that sense. But you don't need to wait. But we are doing the 5-year course. Our next one, the seminar, is marriage and singleness seminar, which will be in November. It's one or the other. I can't remember which one we're tackling this year, but it's in November, and we'll be tackling the same sort of principles for that particular one. And then next year we begin again from health. And then we move to corporate governance and politics. Then we move to education. Then we move to media and arts. Then we move to economics and business. Then we move to marriage and singles again until the 10 years are up. This is our vision. And we are grateful for the testimony. You know that the seminars are helpful. Hopefully that they're helpful for a lot of us here and those that are listening in. So again, a round of applause for our resource persons. Thank you very much. We're really, 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 really grateful. You wanted him to speak about himself. We did introduce him. Okay. Elder Mgala, would you say a little bit about yourself? And then would you say a little bit about yourself? He's asking if you could speak about yourself a little bit and then close for us in prayer.
Who is asking?
Elder Chakwanta.
He knows.
And close in prayer after you've done that.
Okay, like has been said, my name is Clement Mgala, married to Ruth Mgala for 38 years. So we've got 5 children and 5 grandchildren, so we're getting there. Basically, my background is in economics. I started with economics and I did accounting, then I've ended up doing business studies for my postgraduates. I started working in the government. I enjoyed it, but there was a time I had to move from government. One of the things I learned from government was the discipline. That time under the first president of Zambia, they took us through the disciplines and the structured way of working, so much that a lot of my ethical foundations were actually built from that time working in the government. This time there's been quite a lot of things that have changed, but anyone who joined the government at that time, you had actually even to go to NIPA very regularly to be retrained in your work. And then I moved on to what at that time was the state companies under ZIMCO. Now some of the companies, if you are quite young, you won't even know what I'm talking about. But ZIMCO was a group of about 300 companies. So I worked there for quite some time. I was moved from one company to another in my role as a financial controller or financial director, and then ended up working for Building Society as the MD. And then I went to Namibia. I worked there as the general manager, and then I went to Canada, and I worked there as a consultant before we came back. So that has basically been, it's a synopsis of my career. The question is some of the challenges and everything. I've got quite a lot. I started speaking with one which I talked about, but there's 2 defining moments that I always refer to. One was during the time of the second president of Zambia. I was confronted with a lot of ethical decisions to the point whereby, because I said no, I was fired 3 times by President Chiluba, and I was told to go back by the PS, that actually since there's no letter, just go back. So every time he would fire me, then I would go back. So 3 times I was fired, but the defining point was this. One of the cabinet ministers was a Christian. He came home and asked me one question. What have you said to President Chiluba that makes him uncomfortable in the way that he approaches your name? Whenever your name comes up, he's very uncomfortable and unsettled. I don't know what you've done to him. And so when I explained to him, all he said was, I worked with President Chiluba, I've never witnessed to him. I feel ashamed because you've told me the power of simply sharing your testimony to the president and the effect it has on him. So that was a challenging moment, but to cut a story short, the threats went on and our lives was almost affected, so we had to leave the country. That's how I ended up in Namibia and then later on in Canada. The next defining challenge I can talk about is in my consultants business, I look after the affairs of some businesses. At this point, there's a businessman who was leaving the country for 3 months, and he asked me to manage his affairs, mainly to do with financial management. Now, this person is a Muslim. And then he actually wrote a lot of payments, signed them, and said, whenever this payment is ready for, when it's due, you just write to the payee and things like that. And also he was buying a car, and he says, when the time comes, you can just write. That time we were able to write any amount. There was no restriction. You could write $400 million, whatever. And then I said, hey, Mustafa, you're leaving blank checks to me. I'm just a consultant. This is a lot of money. I can actually write them in my name and enrich myself. His answer was, I know you. I've heard a lot about you. You can't do that. And because you can't do it, I'm leaving this with you. Now, it wasn't so much of, perhaps it was a lot of what he said. I came to ask my wife, I said, if a person tells you something like this, can you even attempt to do a wrong thing? That's number one. But to me, the point is this. He has redefined who I am. And I need to live by that standard that he has set. I didn't set that standard, he has set it himself. So in my life, I need to live by that standard. And for me, it was quite a telling thing. So I've got quite a lot that I can share, but because of time, but I feel those have helped to define me in terms of the way I live as a Christian in business. Thank you.
Thank you. Please close for us in prayer. When you were saying Zimko, and some young people don't know what that is, I think Chilambo was thinking Zimko is a doctrine by John Calvin or something. No, Zimko was an institution that ran everything in those days. But anyway, close for us in prayer, Elder. Thank you.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful that you allowed us to share in a moment like this one in this day. We thank you for gathering us together from different stations in our lives for the purpose of learning something to do with running and starting a Christian enterprise. We sought your face when we started, O Lord, in the morning. And we thank you that indeed we can testify of your goodness in guiding us, in leading us, in, Lord, bringing to our understanding the different aspects from the presentations, from the discussions, We thank you also for enriching us in fellowship. We do pray that, Lord, you will assist us, Lord, at a personal, at a church level, at a level of friendship, at a level of family, to be able to put in practice that which we have learned today. Forbid it, Lord, that it may be an academic exercise. Grant that, Lord, will be energized, will be encouraged, will be, oh Lord, refreshed to have a different perspective concerning how to start and how to run a business. Lord, to your glory. We want to do all these things, not because of just focusing on that which it can give us in terms of putting food on the table, but that, Lord, you may be honored and you may be glorified, even in the way we carry out this marketplace business. Do dismiss us, O Lord, now with your blessings. May your hand be upon each one of us, and may we testify of your goodness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you very much. The food has been reduced to, I think it's 30 kwacha now, so please pick up something to support the African Christian University and the person doing the food on your way out. Maybe it's even less, I'm not sure, but just pass there and pick up something to support them. Thank you very much, and may God bless you. We'll see you at the next seminar. Thank you. We always, we stopped doing things for free. So, it's a white envelope. It's not brown.
Yes.
So, Amugal, thank you very much. Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let's help you with this. Hold that.
I hold it?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's nice meeting you. I'm Ben Mwanga.
Okay.
From Cisco Integrity Committee.
Oh, great stuff.
Yes.
You don't know what that is.
So I was with
Okay.
I used to work with Mr. Wazir
Wazir,
Perry.
yes.
So I
The one who told me about the Cisco
when you
Integrity
used,
Committee.
I did not with assembly, but my wife used to work. She was released.
No, I don't know if you were there when